Have you ever said something, totally harmless in your mind, and suddenly, everything changes? She stops laughing. She pulls away. Her tone shifts. And now you're thinking, wait, what just happened? You replay the moment 100 times in your head. Was it the way you said it? Was it the timing? Did you do something wrong? Or is she just being moody? Most men chalk this up to women being confusing. But what if the real confusion is coming from within you? What if every moment you think you're annoying her, frustrating her, or pushing her away isn't just about what you did, but about what you're avoiding? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life studying the human psyche, had this radical idea. The people who upset us the most aren't random. They're messengers, mirrors, portals into parts of ourselves we haven't yet faced. And if you're constantly annoying or being annoyed by women, chances are it's not just about her. It's about the version of you that shows up when she does. Let's slow it down. Picture this. You ask her where she wants to go for dinner. She says, I don't know, whatever you want. So, you pick a place. Then, 15 minutes in, she's quiet, short, annoyed. You're frustrated now. You think, why didn't she just say what she wanted? She thinks, why didn't he read the situation in the room? Both of you are annoyed, but neither of you knows why. This isn't about food. It's about energy. It's about emotional presence and your unconscious reaction to hers. See, Carl Jung believed that within every man lives a feminine counterpart. He called this the Anima, a symbolic figure that holds your inner sensitivity, your intuition, your feeling life. When you don't make peace with her, your Anima, you start projecting her onto the women you meet. You either idolize them or resent them. You either chase their approval or fear their rejection. But either way, you are no longer relating to her. You are relating to the part of yourself that you've never dared to hold. And that's where the frustration begins. Women can feel this, not through logic, but through vibe. They sense when you're performing, when your kindness is just masked anxiety, when your leadership is avoidance, when your confidence is fragile and breaks under emotional pressure. And here's the paradox. The more you try not to annoy her by staying calm and agreeable, the more you irritate her. Because you're not with her in that moment. You're managing her. She doesn't want to be managed. She wants to be met. Not by a perfect man, not by a charming fixer, but by a man who's fully present, unshaken, grounded. Now let's be fair. This isn't just about women being too emotional. It's about you understanding your emotional blind spots. Let's say you grew up in a household where emotions weren't safe. You were told to be strong. Don't cry, don't complain, don't show weakness. So now, every time a woman expresses strong emotion, frustration, disappointment, or sadness, you tense up. You feel it in your jaw. Your chest tightens. Your instinct is to fix it, flee from it, or shut down completely. And when she senses you check out, even for a split second, she pulls away. And suddenly, you're in a cycle. She withdraws. You get confused. You try harder. She gets colder. You get annoyed. And now you're both thinking, why is this so difficult? But here's what's going on. You're not responding to her. You're reacting to a younger version of yourself. The part of you that felt helpless, scared, or invisible when emotions were high. And she, without even meaning to, is awakening that memory in you. That's why it feels so intense. That's why it feels like you're walking on eggshells. Because it's not just her energy you're feeling, it's your history. Carl Jung would say this is your shadow, the rejected, unloved, or misunderstood parts of your personality that you pushed into the dark. And here's the kicker. Every time you meet a woman who triggers you, she's not creating the wound, she's revealing it. Let's take another example. You're in a relationship. You're calm, patient, and thoughtful. You avoid raising your voice. But your partner? She's fiery. She challenges you. She says things that sting. She pushes your buttons. At first, you think, she's toxic. But over time, you realize she's awakening a part of you that's terrified of conflict. Because when you were younger, conflict meant danger. So now, you do everything in your power to keep things smooth, even if that means losing your spine. And when she senses you folding to avoid confrontation, She gets more irritated, not because she wants drama, but because she wants depth. Women feel safe when they know you can meet them in emotional intensity without losing yourself. That doesn't mean yelling. That doesn't mean dominating. It means not disappearing. It means standing firm in your truth, even if your voice shakes. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So when a woman rolls her eyes, or gives you the cold shoulder, or makes a comment that stings, ask yourself, why did that hit me so hard? What part of me did that moment expose? Am I reacting to her, or a ghost from my past? Because here's the truth. Most men don't want to understand women. They want to control how women respond to them. They want guaranteed approval, affection, and peace. But peace without depth is just control with a smile. And control doesn't create connection. It creates distance. So if you find yourself constantly annoying women, or being annoyed by their reactions, pause and look inward. Ask, what am I trying to avoid feeling right now? What does her reaction awaken in me? What story am I telling myself in this moment? Because the man who stops trying to win her and starts trying to meet himself becomes magnetic. She may not always agree with you. She may still challenge you, but she will feel something rare, your presence. And in a world of disconnected men, that is what sets you apart. One of the greatest misunderstandings men carry into their relationships is the belief that emotional neutrality equals strength. That if you simply stay calm, unbothered, unaffected, you'll never annoy her. But in reality, the opposite is often true. When a woman senses you are emotionally checked out or too composed to engage, she doesn't interpret that as maturity. She interprets it as disconnection. Carl Jung would say you're not present, you're defended. And defenses, even when masked as peace, create emotional distance that repels rather than reassures. What most men fail to realize is that the feminine doesn't crave perfection. It craves aliveness. It doesn't need your emotional shutdowns. It needs your emotional availability. Not chaos, not drama, but presence. The kind of presence that isn't scared to feel. And here's the paradox. The more you try to maintain order by suppressing your internal reactions, the more likely you are to provoke disorder around you. Because when you repress emotion in yourself, it doesn't disappear. It leaks. Often, it shows up in the form of passive aggressiveness, dismissiveness, impatience, or a low-level resentment that women can feel like static in the air. Carl Jung's notion of the shadow is key to understanding this. The shadow, as he described, is the part of the psyche that holds everything we deny, disown, or hide, our insecurities, fears, desires, and shame. For many men, especially those raised to be strong, the shadow often includes vulnerability, fear of failure, emotional neediness, or sensitivity. But here's where it gets complicated. When a woman's energy touches that shadow, often unintentionally, it triggers an emotional response in you that has little to do with her and everything to do with what you've buried inside. For example, imagine she's expressing frustration about something you said. Nothing major, just a bit of tension. But instead of calmly engaging, you feel this sudden urge to defend yourself. You explain, justify, or shut down entirely. Why? Because underneath her words lies a deeper emotional chord. Maybe you were criticized harshly growing up. Maybe you were taught that love is conditional, something you have to earn by being good, agreeable, or emotionally spotless. So now, when she voices even mild dissatisfaction, it doesn't feel like feedback. It feels like rejection. And when rejection is the trigger, you don't respond to her words. You respond to your wound. This is why so many men unconsciously annoy women by either becoming overly apologetic, constantly trying to make things right, or becoming cold and detached. Both responses are symptoms of the same deeper issue, the inability to stay grounded in discomfort. Carl Jung believed that wholeness, the true goal of psychological growth, requires the integration of these hidden parts. And in the context of relationships, integration means owning your inner responses rather than blaming her for triggering them. When you feel hurt, say so. When you feel fear, acknowledge it, at least to yourself. Because the more you try to suppress or outperform your inner world, the more likely it is to erupt in unpredictable ways. A woman will not be upset with a man who knows how to feel. She's annoyed by a man who hides what he feels behind behaviors he can't even explain. That's when you get phrases like, he's emotionally unavailable, or he just doesn't get it. And what she's often picking up on isn't your lack of logic, it's your lack of inner congruence. You might say all the right things, but she senses that you're not telling yourself the truth. Let's go deeper. Carl Jung also wrote extensively about projection, the idea that we often see in others what we can't face in ourselves. In romantic relationships, this is especially potent. You might get irritated by her emotional intensity because you've never allowed yourself to be that expressive. You might find her desire for closeness overwhelming because deep down, intimacy feels dangerous to you. You might call her too sensitive, when the truth is, her sensitivity reminds you of your own that you've worked hard to suppress. This is where the anima enters again. Carl Jung saw the anima as the key to a man's emotional growth. She represents not just femininity in a traditional sense, but a man's relationship to emotion, intuition, and the unconscious. When the anima is rejected or repressed, a man becomes emotionally rigid, overly rational, and strangely dependent on external approval, especially from women. But when a man begins to integrate the anima, he stops needing women to regulate his emotional world. He becomes less reactive, more receptive, and ultimately more whole. And that wholeness is what women respond to. Not perfection, not constant harmony, but the depth that comes from a man who knows himself. A man who can hold space for his complexity, his fear, his anger, his longing, without making others responsible for it. So let's say you're in an argument with your partner. She says something sharp, your chest tightens. The old narrative wants to take over. She doesn't respect me. I can't win. I give everything, and it's never enough. But instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe. You ask yourself, not her, where have I felt this before? You trace the feeling back, not just to the last argument, but to the wound that lives beneath the surface. Maybe it's the memory of a parent's disapproval. Maybe it's the pain of being ignored when you needed love most. Whatever it is, that's your work, not hers. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you don't face your emotional history, you will repeat it. You'll annoy her by acting out your childhood coping mechanisms. You'll feel annoyed with her when she unintentionally brushes up against a scar you haven't healed, and then you'll both think the other person is the problem, when really, it's the unexamined self that's doing the damage. Now, this doesn't mean you have to turn every moment of tension into a therapy session. It doesn't mean you overanalyze her every reaction. What it means is this: when conflict arises, don't rush to fix her. Use the moment to examine yourself. Ask, what does this reveal about how I deal with disapproval, conflict, or vulnerability? Because when you start doing that, something incredible happens. You stop projecting, and you start connecting. She'll feel it too. She'll feel that your presence is no longer about managing her response, but about being rooted in your own. And that presence is magnetic. It doesn't mean she'll never be upset with you. It means that when she is, your foundation won't shake. You'll be able to listen, speak your truth, and navigate the tension without collapsing into self-doubt or reactivity. That is what it means to be unannoying. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've become self-aware. And a self-aware man is far harder to trigger. Not because he's numb, but because he no longer borrows his identity from the emotional climate of the moment. So if you want to stop annoying women, or being annoyed by them, it begins here. Stop treating their emotions as problems to solve, and start seeing them as opportunities to understand yourself. Stop trying to earn peace through performance, and start cultivating peace through presence. Stop reacting to her feelings, and start responding to your own. Because the most powerful man in the room isn't the one who always stays calm. It's the one who knows what he feels, owns it without shame, and stays grounded in truth, even when everything around him gets loud. At some point, every man asks himself, why do I keep having the same argument with different women? Why does it always spiral into the same confusion, the same shutdown, the same distance? The names change, the faces change, but the pattern repeats. This is not a coincidence. According to Carl Jung, it's a consequence of unintegrated parts of your psyche playing themselves out through your relationships. And until you confront those parts, You'll keep encountering women who seem to cause the same emotional reactions, when in fact, they're only revealing what's already inside you. Carl Jung didn't see relationships as just social contracts or romantic companionships. He saw them as psychological mirrors, intimate crucibles where the hidden corners of your unconscious are illuminated. If you're repeatedly annoying the women in your life, or constantly feeling irritated by them, you're likely caught in a dynamic where neither party is seeing clearly. She's reacting to your shadow, and you're reacting to hers. No one is rooted, and so you both end up acting out old emotional scripts without realizing it. Let's break it down further. One of the most frustrating moments for a man is when he expresses himself logically, calmly, and thinks the conversation is over, only to find that she's still upset. He may even become angry or feel like she's too emotional. But the truth is, the issue wasn't the content. It was the lack of emotional presence in the delivery. She didn't want a solution. She wanted to feel met, heard, and felt, not fixed. When you miss that, even the right words will land the wrong way. This is why emotional intelligence matters far more than intellectual clarity in relationships. You can say all the right things, but if your energy says, "I want this over with," she'll feel it. Women are attuned not just to your words, but to your emotional posture. Are you here, or are you performing? Are you grounded, or are you subtly rejecting the emotional texture of the moment? Carl Jung would call this a failure to engage the anima. When a man avoids feeling, when he bypasses the emotional current of a conversation, he disconnects from his own inner feminine, and therefore cannot meet the woman in front of him in any real way. He becomes cold, analytical, and absent. And that absence is what frustrates her. Not the disagreement, not even the conflict, but the emotional vacancy. What women often refer to as not feeling safe is not about physical danger. It's about emotional availability. If you're not present, she cannot feel held. Now, this doesn't mean you need to cry on cue or become dramatically expressive. It simply means that you must be willing to stay with your discomfort, to stay with hers, and to stay rooted when your instincts want to flee. Carl Jung believed that true psychological maturity is marked by the ability to hold opposites. In this case, the ability to hold both your discomfort and her emotion without trying to resolve either immediately. But that's hard, especially for men who were raised in emotional droughts, households where vulnerability was a liability, not a strength. For them, the emotional world of a woman can feel overwhelming, even threatening. Her feelings are intense, fast-moving, and sometimes contradictory. And if you haven't yet met your inner emotional complexity, you'll see hers as too much. You'll want to calm her, control her, or silence her, not because she's wrong, but because you haven't yet learned to navigate your emotional terrain. This is where a man unknowingly begins to annoy the women around him, not through malice, but through emotional avoidance. And women sense this. They may not articulate it in Carl Jungian language, but they feel the disconnect, the misalignment, the mask. When you speak from your head and not your heart, she knows. And when you respond from logic while ignoring her emotional truth, she feels dismissed. Even if you think you're being rational, you're being evasive, and no one likes being emotionally dodged. There's also a hidden danger in over-explaining. Many men, in their attempt not to upset their partner, will overanalyze their behavior, apologize excessively, or try to explain their intentions in detail. But this can also annoy women, because it creates a dynamic where the man is no longer standing in his truth. He's seeking permission. And when a woman senses that a man needs her approval to feel okay, it flips the polarity. She no longer feels the masculine container. She feels like she has to hold the space. That reversal leads to resentment, quiet at first, then corrosive. So what's the antidote? It's not withdrawal. It's not appeasement. It's not hyper-rationality. The antidote is inner integration. Carl Jung taught that when you integrate your shadow and your anima, when you stop rejecting the emotional, reactive, insecure, or vulnerable parts of yourself, you stop needing the women in your life to regulate them for you. You no longer become reactive when she expresses emotion. You no longer try to edit yourself so she won't get upset. You stop performing, and you start being. And here's the incredible thing. When you become emotionally integrated, your very presence changes. You stop speaking to get a reaction. You stop acting out of fear. You become stable, not as a performance, but as a result of self-understanding. And women feel this. They don't feel manipulated or led. They feel met, safe, respected, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And realness is rare. Let's put this in context. Say she's angry, very angry. Maybe you said something insensitive. Maybe you forgot something important. Her voice rises. She's emotional. Your gut reaction might be to defend yourself, correct the facts, or shut down. But instead, you take a breath. You feel the impulse to control the situation, and you don't act on it. You say, "I hear you," not to pacify, but because you do. You let her feel what she needs to feel. You don't fix. You don't flee. You stay. And from that moment on, the dynamic changes, not just in the moment, but in the relationship. That's not weakness. That's power, the quiet power of self-mastery. The kind Carl Jung spent his life trying to help people uncover, not by changing the world, but by knowing themselves so deeply that the world could no longer disturb their center. So if you want to stop annoying women, stop trying to change how they feel. Start noticing how you react when they feel. What happens to you when she's upset? What old story kicks in? Is it the story that you're failing? That you're not enough? Is love conditional and can be taken away at any moment? These are not surface-level thoughts. These are deep, unconscious beliefs, shaped long before any woman you've ever dated entered the picture. And until you confront those stories, you'll keep handing them to her, expecting her to rewrite them for you. That's too much pressure for anyone. When you reclaim that responsibility, you free her. And more importantly, you free yourself. Integration, as Carl Jung taught, is not about eliminating conflict. It's about understanding it, seeing it not as a threat, but as a teacher. Every moment of tension in your relationship is an opportunity to grow, not just as a partner, but as a man, as a human being, learning how to love without fear and relate without masks. You want to stop irritating her? Show up, not as a version of what you think she wants, but as the man who's met himself fully. Because once you've met your shadow and welcomed your anima, no woman has to carry your unloved parts for you. And that, perhaps more than anything, is the gift that ends the cycle. By now, the message should be clear. If you want to stop annoying women or being thrown off by their reactions, you have to stop outsourcing your emotional balance to the external world. You have to stop making her mood the thermostat for your self-worth. Because the moment she feels that responsibility, whether she's aware of it or not, it creates pressure, distortion, and eventually, emotional withdrawal. Carl Jung's teaching is simple, but difficult to practice. Your internal reality creates your experience. Until you take ownership of it, your relationships will continue to reflect your disconnection. This doesn't mean you should suppress your emotions, pretend nothing affects you, or become some version of a stoic robot. That's not integration. That's detachment masquerading as control. Carl Jung made a sharp distinction here. Real peace doesn't come from avoiding triggers. It comes from disarming them. And you disarm them not by ignoring them, but by understanding them. When you're no longer afraid of your shadow, your shame, your neediness, your longing, your frustration, then you no longer react when someone touches it. It becomes part of your wholeness, not a hidden liability waiting to explode. Let's ground this idea in something practical. Let's say you're dating someone and she becomes upset. Maybe because you didn't respond to a message. Maybe because she felt overlooked. Her tone is sharp. Her expression is closed. Your instinct might be to fight back, to defend, or to numb out. But what if you saw this moment not as a test of your logic, but as a mirror to your emotional structure? What if instead of saying, "She's overreacting," you asked, "What is this reaction stirring in me? Why do I feel like I'm under attack just because someone is upset?" More often than not, we respond defensively not because the other person is dangerous, but because we feel emotionally exposed. That exposure is not weakness. It's a map, a clue, a breadcrumb trail that leads back to a part of ourselves we haven't yet integrated. Carl Jung said that the person we are most uncomfortable around is the one who mirrors a part of ourselves we haven't accepted. In that light, every emotionally charged moment becomes a lesson, not in how to manage others, but in how to meet ourselves. This also explains why certain women seem to bring out the worst in you. Not because they're toxic, but because their energy lights up something unhealed. That doesn't mean you should stay in harmful dynamics. But it does mean that when you feel a powerful emotional reaction, jealousy, rage, fear, or confusion, it's not only about her, it's about the internal material she's waking up in you. And if you leave the relationship without addressing that, it will show up again in the next one. Different name, same mirror. So what does integration look like? It looks like no longer shrinking when someone challenges your opinion. It means standing in your truth, not to dominate, not to win, but to stay honest, even when it's uncomfortable. It means hearing her frustration without immediately trying to solve it. It means seeing her anger not as a threat, but as an expression of something that matters to her. It means no longer needing to control how she sees you, because you've already done the work to see yourself. That's not emotional perfection, that's emotional responsibility. When Carl Jung talked about individuation, he wasn't referring to becoming invulnerable or untouchable. He was talking about becoming whole, so whole that no external opinion, no emotional storm, no moment of misunderstanding can unseat you from yourself. In the context of relationships, this means no longer bending your behavior to avoid upsetting her. It means no longer performing emotional labor in exchange for closeness. It means trusting that your grounded presence is enough, that you don't have to hustle for her love, that your worth is not on trial every time she's upset. This is what makes a man trustworthy. Not that he never causes pain, but that he doesn't collapse under emotional pressure. That when things get difficult, he doesn't run or react. He stays. He reflects. He listens. He speaks clearly. He holds the space for both people to be fully human without trying to fix, control, or protect his image. Because the man who's made peace with himself cannot be manipulated. He cannot be guilt-tripped into silence. He cannot be baited into anger. He doesn't use apologies as a strategy. He uses them as an honest reflection of accountability. And when he sets a boundary, it's not a performance. It's a natural extension of knowing what he values. For women, this kind of man is a rare experience. Not because he's flawless, but because he feels real. He doesn't try to charm his way out of discomfort. He doesn't try to earn affection with over-explaining. He simply shows up, fully, imperfectly, but consistently. That's what makes him hard to annoy. Because when a man has integrated his inner feminine, his anima, he no longer demands that women regulate his emotions. He no longer interprets her criticism as condemnation. He no longer makes her the source of his emotional highs and lows. He becomes responsible for his inner world, which means he's no longer reactive to hers. This is not only liberating for you, it's liberating for her. When a woman doesn't have to walk on eggshells around your fragility, she can trust you. Not just love you, but trust you. That's what makes emotional intimacy possible. And that trust is what transforms your presence from a source of irritation to a foundation of strength. So if you want to stop annoying the women in your life, don't memorize a set of tricks. Don't watch hours of manipulation strategies disguised as masculine energy. Look inward. Ask yourself, what part of me gets shaky when she's upset? What am I afraid her reaction might mean about me? Where am I still outsourcing my value to her approval? Because the deeper you go into those questions, the more power you reclaim. You stop living in reaction. You stop feeling like you're always one wrong word away from conflict. You start to breathe again, to speak more slowly, to show up without armor. And ironically, the less you try to avoid annoying her, the less you do. Women aren't frustrated by men who make mistakes. They're frustrated by men who are emotionally unclear, men who don't know what they feel, what they want, or who they are. But when you become someone who meets himself fully, you no longer need her to complete you. You meet her as a partner, not a child, not a fixer, not a performer. That's the man she wants beside her. Not because he's perfect, but because he's real, present, and free. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." So choose this. Become a man who isn't ruled by external reactions. Become a man whose presence soothes. Not because he's controlling, but because he's centered. Become the man who makes women feel safe, not through silence, but through substance, through depth, through the quiet power of someone who knows himself. You want to stop being reactive? Start being rooted. You want to stop chasing approval? Start owning your truth. You want to stop annoying her? Start integrating you. Because when you do, you don't just transform your relationships, you transform your entire experience of connection. And the world, especially the feminine, will respond in kind.